have no idea how many crickets you can fit inside a Pepsi can. From now on, I'm watching out for the signs. You know, I really feel for the uncredited and probably underpaid and malnourished artists at Konami's Yu-Gi-Oh division. They're likely not allowed an enviable amount of human contact in whatever dungeon they're being kept in, so it must be a nice way to blow off some steam when they're commissioned to draw something as unapologetically horny as Harpie artwork. Famously used and perfumed by Mai of Yu-Gi-Oh! DM fame, the oddly spelled Harpie ladies were among the first proto-archetypes in the game's design sphere before the concept of archetypes really took off. Initially they didn't have much going for them besides the unique theme and a little bit of swarming, but 20 years and a couple bursts of legacy support later, they're an interestingly realized group of cards with a history that's fun to dig through. Also, I'm not gonna dwell much more on the Harpie artwork unless something about it is relevant, cause there's only so many jokes you can make about birds with tits, but it's worth pointing out that the TCG's idea of censoring these cards to this day is giving their upper bodies a taste of the Willy Wonka blueberry gum. You know, speaking of Mai, where is she? How's she doing? Why'd she have more screen time in Pyramid of Light than Dark Side of fucking Dimensions? Is she okay? We start off with the original normal monster, Harpie Lady. Setting the framework for the rest of the deck, she's a level 4 winged beast with 1300 attack and 1400 defense, and anything I'd have to say about any other normal monster also applies here. Besides its name being important for the deck to function, which we'll get to soon, you run it if you want easy field presence with Unexpected Eye or even Xyz material with Rescue Rabbit, the former being the more popular option. And that's about all there is to do with it. I mean, what else do I say? It works well with the potato and chip support. In order to keep track of the archetype's history, we'll be looking at the cards in order of release date, including the back row, because it's often relevant enough to mention early. So we move on to Elegant Egotist, which is a normal spell that says, if Harpie Lady is in the field, special summon one Harpie Lady or Harpie Lady Sisters from your hand or deck. This is a card that could have only been printed in 1999, because today it would be crammed so chock full of once per turn restrictions you would go into time trying to find the actual effect. To nobody's surprise, this is still an absolute staple in Harpie decks, mostly because of their naming shenanigans. Also, it's apparently the first card ever to special summon monsters from the deck, so good job being ahead of the game during the goddamn Stone Age. To add to that, there's also Cyber Shield, a spell you can equip to Harpie Lady or Harpie Lady Sisters to increase their attack by 500, which is obviously not something you would ever play, but it bears mentioning that if this half-ass shading job on the chest area looks weird, that would be because the card's Japanese name is Cyber Bondage and it looks like this. And the aforementioned Harpie Lady Sisters is the following card. A level 6 with 1950 attack and 2100 defense, and the only effect being that it cannot be normal summoned or set, and must first be special summoned with Elegant Egotist. Contrary to the spell that summons it, this was probably one of the most pathetic things in the game for a massive amount of time and represents the other side of the coin that is 1999 card design. In fact, Konami was so salty about this card's miserable state of being that they based a bunch of modern Harpie support around sisters being on the field. So outside of being the world's most debatable definition of a beater, it's also a mule to hold your support effects. I'd say running one copy very reluctantly is mandatory, but there are enough suitable replacements in the archetype if you really can't stand it. As the last monster in the deck's first year of existence, we have Harpie's Pet Dragon, a dragon with 2000 attack and 2500 defense, which gains 300 attack and defense for each Harpie Lady on the field. While you could technically consider this a progenitor to the lovely trend of out-of-place archetypal dragon monsters, at least there's a semblance of lore behind the concept of a tribe of bird women taming a fucking dragon as a pet. And I don't want to see anyone in the comment section going, God, I wish they were me. The card itself is pretty pointless nowadays though. It used to be the crucial part of a small rank 7 engine the archetype got near the end of the Xyz era, and it could potentially get pretty beefy, but neither of these things make it worth running in this day and age, especially given the fact that it also got a reprint recently. Yeah, this one can stay in the dragon house. Now, technically there's also Harpie's Feather Duster. To all two of you unfamiliar with what this is, it's a generic normal spell that just wipes the opponent's entire back row for no cost, because once again it was the 90s and they could just print whatever they wanted. It's also the main reason why the vast majority of Harpie support that searches out their back row states that you search a card that mentions Harpie Lady instead of just saying add a Harpie card to your hand, because somehow the game has still not reached the point where searchable Feather Dusters are okay. That is, other than the cards that let them search Feather Duster, but one broken back row at a time here, people. To quickly cover an important part of the anomaly that is Yu-Gi-Oh's early localization, we have Sky Scout, a normal monster with a decent stat line that also happens to be named Birdman in the OCG, and was originally translated translated as Harpie's brother, presumably due to a mix-up at the maternity ward. The name Harpie's brother stayed for 11 years, making the deck occasionally suffer a frog the jam type of situation, getting changed just in the nick of time to save the new archetype encompassing Harpie support from a similar fate. At the end of the day, it's a translation goof that didn't matter much in the long run, but it's just funny to imagine how things would be if stuff like this was still happening regularly. Like, give me that evil hero neck hunter. Now we move on to the Harpie stuff, which was sporadically released during the early to mid-2000s, my favorite period of time, starting with Cyber Harpie Lady, a level 4 with 1800 attack and 1300 defense, and is always treated as Harpie Lady. That's it. The card literally is just a Harpie Lady with Cyber Shield equipped, and an effect that makes it less of a retrain and more of a full-on remake because it flat out replaces the original in your deck. To this day, Harpie Ladies are the only instance of a main deck monster sharing its exact name with multiple other cards, indicating that you're not allowed to have more than 3 of any in there, even though running more than 3 would probably be an even bigger issue. The name sharing, which continues in different ways to the archetype, is the reason why Elegant Egotist works as well as it does, and why the remake ratios become a whole debate. It used to be an objectively better monster than the vanilla, but these days most people would rather have the free summon from deck. Then again, with the recent OCG release, Summon Storm, the remakes are much easier to swarm with, in addition to giving the deck more discard fodder. Run this one by preference. Next up is Birdface. That's literally just an insult, why would you call it that?
Block off, Featherface!
It's got 1600 attack and defense, and when it's destroyed by battle, you can search a Harpie Lady. Yeah, it's clearly pointless and outdated, but I do want to focus on how random this card is. For all intents and purposes, it looks like a generic bird monster, it doesn't appear in any of the Harpie artwork, nor is it implied at all that it's related to them by stat line. It might as well be a completely generic winged beast and nobody would bat an eye. Why is it just some freaking bird face?
Bird!
Much more importantly, we have the 3 alternate Harpie Lady remakes, very cleverly named Harpie Lady 1, 2, and 3. Man, I wonder what they would name the 4th one. They all share the stats of the original, are always treated as Harpie Lady, and have pretty simple individual effects. Harpie Lady 1 increases the attack of all wind monsters by 300, Harpie Lady 2 negates the effects of flip monsters it destroys by battle, and Harpie Lady 3 prevents a monster that battled it from attacking for 2 of the opponent's turns. I know I already went into it with their initial support, but I just love how easily you can deduce the time period in which most Harpie cards came out just by reading their effects. These are very typical abilities for mediocre 2004 anime support, the only one of which saw any play being Harpie Lady 1 because stacking attack boost is fun. Today it's a toss-up between her and Cyber Harpie Lady if you're not opting for the vanilla, as the stat benefits you get from either are fairly similar. As for the other two, at least they've got new designs, although I'm struggling to call whatever's going on with 3's head a design. After that we have Harpie Girl. It's a level 2 vanilla with 500 attack and defense, for no particular purpose. And I'm pretty sure this just exists because some genius at Konami, presumably out of spite for the TCG or other reasons, decided that the next logical step for Harpie artwork is removing the skin suit from their lower bodies too. Where would we be without these visionaries? Next up we have the normal spell Triangle Ecstasy Spark. Until the end of this turn, the attack of all Harpie Lady sisters currently on the field becomes 2700, your opponent cannot activate any trap cards, also negate all your opponent's trap effects on the field. This one's just weird. I know it's a signature attack card and all, but it feels like they wanted to make a field nuke but couldn't commit to it for some reason, so all it does is make an awful beater into a slightly less awful one for a turn. The trap stun beats the hell out of Helmlich, I guess.
This is the one thing we didn't want to happen.
The more important spell from this line of support is Harpie's Hunting Ground. I don't even have any jokes to make about the artwork depicting the systematic extermination of Ojamas. I just think it's very cathartic. All winged beast monsters gain 200 attack and defense. If any Harpie Lady or Harpie Lady sisters is normal or special summoned, the player who conducted the summon targets one spell or trap on the field, that player destroys that target. This is the type of field spell that's solid to have around, even if you're not basing your entire game plan around it. You're basically guaranteed constant back row removal because this deck does plenty of summoning, and even though the effect is mandatory and the card has to pop itself if there are no targets remaining, it rarely tends to be a big detriment, especially with your own back row's floating effects. Now go out there and pop every single last copy of Ojama Country you can find. Their first trap is the curiously named Hysteric Party.
Bitches be shopping!
Hysteric Party is a continuous trap that lets you discard one card to special summon as many copies of Harpie Lady from your graveyard as you can, but when this card leaves the field, destroy those monsters. This rocks because it's basically Call of the Haunted on crack for a small cost. It's not really imperative to run with all the modern support, but it can't hurt too much if you do. Another one to run by preference. Their next monster is the level 4 Harpie's Pet Baby Dragon. Okay, well, it's a lot less cool if you captured it when it was a baby, but seems like the baby is somehow stronger than the older version, so good on you. It's got 1200 attack and 600 defense, and this card gains effects based on the number of Harpie monsters you control, except Harpie's pet baby dragon. 1 or more, your opponent cannot target Harpie monsters you control for attacks, except Harpie's pet baby dragon. 2 or more, double the original attack and defense of this card, and 3 or more, once per turn you can target one card your opponent controls, destroy that target. For the time, this was actually a pretty beefy array of abilities that modernized the archaic effect of the original, but hardly enough to run it in any moderately competitive build, which is still very true today. Even if you're partial to the concept of running one of the pet dragons in a Harpie deck, we're still only halfway through all the versions of those, so it's hardly an issue that all the baby's doing is shitting its pants. And what will be the final Harpie monster for more than half a decade is the 2007 release Harpie Queen. She's got 1900 attack and 1200 defense, her name becomes Harpie Lady while in the field or in the graveyard, and you can discard it to add a Harpie's hunting ground from your deck to your hand. Before the age of the Link 1 that searches the field spell, we used to have the discard beater that searches the field spell. Along with her good stat line and search ability, Queen is also only treated as Harpie Lady while on the field or in the graveyard. This means that while you can't summon her off Elegant Egotist, you can activate it while she's on the field, revive her with Hysteric Party or similar support cards, and you can run her at several copies independently of other Harpie Ladies. This is a property shared by each of the upcoming Harpies, and it's basically just a slightly more esoteric way of rounding up the Archetype's monsters. Queen is not necessary nowadays, but it's far from the worst card you could run if you really need that field spell. And for a while, that was it. Harpies were left in this messy, half-finished state with a promising potential for a swarm-heavy playstyle, but weren't really expanded upon with anything substantial. That is until 2013, smack dab in the middle of the Xyz era, and their first real line of legacy support. Harpie Channeler is a level 4 with 1400 attack and 1300 defense, which says you can discard one Harpie card, special summon one Harpie monster from your deck in face-up defense position, except Harpie Channeler. You can only use this effect once per turn. While you control a Dragon-type monster, this card's level becomes 7. For a single archetypal discard, you got access to the game's entire pool of generic rank 4s, and much more importantly for the time, rank 7s. This was an incredibly powerful boost to the deck despite being an ostensibly simple effect, and it's still actively ran today because, come on, it's field presence and graveyard setup. Like, no, I don't want a free extra deck monster. It tends to go pretty well with Arsenal Falcon, letting you bring out more birds from the deck while putting a big body on the field. Run 3 Channeler. Alongside it we also got Harpie Dancer. She's got 1200 attack and 1000 defense and the following effect. You can target one wind monster you control, return it to the hand, then you can normal summon one wind monster. You can only use this effect of Harpie Dancer once per turn. This one's a little strange. It mostly dances around the field spells because the main point of this effect is either repeated back row pops from Hunting Ground or summoning from deck via Divine Wind of Mist Valley. The card was kind of a big deal back in the day, but even though it synergizes well with some modern support, its time has mostly passed. Seeing Dancer on the field right now is like seeing somebody in 2021 doing the Carlton. And that somebody is me. I'm doing the Carlton. Harpie's pet Phantasmal Dragon is a rank 4 Xyz with 2000 attack and 2500 defense, requires 3 level 4 wind monsters, and this card's effects can only be applied and resolved while it has Xyz material. This card can attack your opponent directly. Your opponent cannot target any Harpie monsters with effects or for attacks. During each of your end phases, detach 1 Xyz material from this card. Mother of God, that's a lot of protection on one monster, and it can attack directly? No wonder the summoning condition is bloated to high heavens. This is great to have on the field to force the opponent to resort to non-targeting removal, that is, if you can make it. Harpies don't really struggle with putting 3 level 4s on the field, but they would much rather spend them on something more proactive rather than a castle that guards nothing until they restore their advantage. If you can make it while already having a strong field, it can be very useful, but absolutely do not prioritize it. Harpie Lady Phoenix Formation is a normal spell that says if you control 3 or more Harpie Lady and or Harpie Lady sisters, target as many monsters your opponent controls as possible, but not more than the total number of Harpie Lady and sisters you control, destroy those targets, and if you do, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the highest original attack among those destroyed monsters. You cannot special summon monsters from the main deck or extra deck, nor conduct your battle phase the turn you activate this card. It's a very scuffed adaptation of a field nuke from the anime that comes with less burn damage and additional restrictions. You're really not this desperate for removal, so forget about it. A much more important Harpie spell is the continuous spell Hysteric Sign. When this card is activated, add 1 Elegant Egotist from your deck or graveyard to your hand. During the end phase, if this card is in the graveyard because it was sent there from the hand or field this turn, add up to 3 Harpie cards with different names from each other from your deck to your hand. You can only use 1 Hysteric Sign effect per turn, and only once that turn. 3 extra copies of Elegant Egotist, plus an amazing search effect on floating, which you can trigger yourself by popping or discarding, and it searches any Harpie cards including Feather Duster. Literally no reason to run less than 3 of these, it's almost too good. The only downside is that you can only activate 1 of its effects per turn, and the Elegant Egotist search is mandatory, so watch out not to blow your chance to make a delayed but bigger play. Their last monster for a solid couple of years came in the form of Harpie Harpist. I bet she's good friends with Harp Horror. She's got 1700 attack and 600 defense, and you can only use each of these effects once per turn. When this card is normal summoned, you can target one other winged beast type monster you control and one face up monster your opponent controls, return them to the hand. During the end phase, if this card is in the graveyard because it was sent there this turn, you can add one winged beast type monster with 1500 or less attack from your deck to your hand. Harpist is mostly discard fodder, and it would be nice if it was a little faster, but it's still valuable for triggering Harpie discard effects, much like it was used for some older techs such as Regeki Break or Phoenix Winged Wind Blast. God, it never gets any easier! The first effect doesn't really come up often, if ever, but it's a cute bonus to have on the side. Overall, fine enough to run up to 2 copies. In between Harpist and the modern Harpie support wave, we got something particularly out of left field with an adaptation of the anime card Harpie's Feather Storm. It's a normal trap that says if you control a winged beast monster, until the end of this turn, negate any monster effects your opponent activates. If you control a Harpie monster, you can activate this card from your hand. If this card and its owner's spell and trap zone is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you can add one Harpie's Feather Duster from your deck or graveyard to your hand. For a card so closely related to Feather Duster, it's no wonder this is something as strong as a one-sided hand trap skill drain. For basically no cost, you get to completely shut down your opponent's monster output for a turn, it's searchable by Hysteric Sign's floating effect, and it's pretty generic on top of it. The search effect likely won't go off very often, and when it does it might be a bit too late for clearing back row, but at least it's cute that Feather Duster was given a full mention as part of the archetype. Whatever the case, run 3 at all times. And with that, we finally move on to the most recent support, starting with Harpie Perfumer. She's got 1400 attack and 1300 defense, and if it's normal or special summoned, you can add one spell or trap card from your deck to your hand that specifically lists the card Harpie Lady Sisters in its text. If you control the level 5 or higher Harpie monster when you activated this effect, you can also add a second such card with a different name from the first. You can only use this effect once per turn. Pretty self-explanatory, it's just a nice and simple back row searcher. What makes it stand out is the double search condition, which obviously puts an accent on Sisters or Dragon, incentivizing you to run some subpar monsters for a potential consistency boost. I don't mind this too much because the higher level Harpie monsters are not that much of a hassle to bring out, but it still feels moderately forced. Level 5 or higher Harpies you would want to summon used to be limited to Pet Dragon because of Channeler, but now you have a reason to run the even brickier Harpie Lady Sisters due to Elegant Egotist being a thing. Anyway, the Harpie back row is important enough to run 3 Perfumer. Don't forget the Harpie Sephora field spell though. Similarly, there's Harpie Oracle. She's got all the standard Harpie stats, and you can only use each of these effects once per turn. If you control a level 5 or higher Harpie monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can add one spell or trap card from your graveyard to your hand that specifically lists the card Harpie Lady Sisters in its text during the end phase of this turn. It's not nearly as good as Perfumer, but it does the job as a one-off. You get a bit of swarming for an awkward condition and some slow back row recovery. Frankly, I wish the second effect was completely different because Perfumer already gives us enough access to back row, but they work well enough in tandem. It's just okay. Harpie's Feather Rest is a normal spell with the effect: target 3 Harpie Lady and or Harpie Lady Sisters in your graveyard, shuffle them into the deck, then draw 1 card. If you control the level 5 or higher Harpie monster when you activated this effect, draw 2 cards instead. For the rest of this turn after this card resolves, you cannot special summon monsters except wind monsters. You can only activate 1 Harpie's Feather Rest per turn. It's an archetypal pot of avarice, this one being filled up with Harpie Bathwater. It's very solid recovery as well as play extension, especially if you have a high level monster out, but running more than 1 copy would definitely make it too cloggy since you don't need to clean up your graveyard that much and you can easily search and recycle the card. I don't really get the necessity for locking you into wind special summons, but given the way this deck operates, it's not really a big deal. Another decent one off. The final spell card on the menu today is Alluring Mirror Split. It's a continuous spell that says when a Harpie Lady or Harpie Lady Sisters you control is destroyed by battle, you can special summon 1 Harpie monster from your deck with a different original name for the destroyed monster. If this card you control is destroyed by a Harpie card's effect or your opponent's card effect, target 1 Harpie monster in your graveyard, special summon it. You can only use each effect of Alluring Mirror Split once per turn. It's a nice backup to stay on the field if it's already built up well enough. It helps that there's no level limitation, so you can bring out a body like Dragon in case you need battle protection. Also, the second effect specifically floating off Harpie cards is a pretty blatant way to take advantage of Hunting Grounds popping effect, so there's some extra recovery in that. Once again, it's perfectly serviceable. The last trap card in the Harpie lineup is Harpie Lady Elegance, with the following effect. Shuffle 1 Harpie Lady Sisters from your monster zone into the deck, then you can special summon 3 Harpie monsters with different original names, 1 each from your hand, deck and graveyard. For the rest of this turn after this card resolves, you can now special summon monsters except wind monsters. If this card you control is destroyed by a Harpie card's effect or your opponent's card effect, add one Harpie monster from your deck to your hand. You can only use each effect of Harpie Lady Elegance once per turn. This would actually be kinda cool if it was a quick play spell as a way to extend your plays involving sisters, but right now it's an unconventional way to dodge targeting at most. You might actually get more use out of the floating effect by popping it to the field spell because its primary use is just a little too slow. Run one if you want to, but it's really not necessary. Moving on to the final 3 monsters, we pay a visit to the extra deck with Harpie Conductor. She's a Link 2 with 1900 attack, points bottom left and bottom right, requires 2 wind monsters, and you can only use each of the following effects once per turn. If a Harpie monster you control will be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can destroy one spell or trap card you control instead. If another face-up Harpie monster you control returns to your hand except during the damage step, you can target one special summon monster your opponent controls, return it to the hand. Conductor doesn't really do much on her own, but her redirection effect allows you to trigger the floating on your back row, which is a neat way to go about protection, which unfortunately only works once per turn for some reason. The bouncing effect is cute, but it barely ever goes off unless you have a bit of setup ready. Really, when it comes to protection, you more often find yourself making the Link Simorg rather than Conductor, but she's still a valuable asset to the deck as long as you make sure she's not alone in the field. As yet another surprise, we recently got the signature attack based Synchro monster, Cyber Slash Harpie Lady. She's a generic level 8 with 2600 attack and 1400 defense, and for this card Synchro Summon, you can treat one Harpie monster you control as a tuner. When a spell or trap card or effect is activated during either player's turn, you can target one monster your opponent controls or one Harpie monster you control, return it to the hand. You can only use this effect once per turn. This is a much more proactive bouncing effect, having a versatile condition, as well as letting you target most of the monsters on the field, slowing down the opponent's plays or triggering your own effects. The decision to make it a synchro is odd to say the least, given that it might as well have been a contact fusion with the same materials, and it would have been way more in line with the dual monsters theming, but it's fine, nothing is sacred anyway. Another important aspect of the card is that it's a high level Harpie which you can summon with any 2 level 4 Harpies, making it a great replacement for sisters to activate the stronger support effects. It's easy to make while basically being the most important boss monster in the archetype, so run at least 2. And finally we have the most recent refrain of Harpie's pet dragon, that being another signature attack form, Fearsome Fire Blast. It's got the usual pet dragon stats, and its effect is that monsters cannot target level 6 or lower Harpie monsters for attacks. You can only use each of the following effects once per turn. If you control a level 6 or lower wind monster, you can special summon this card from your hand in defense position. If this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can send one wind-winged beast monster from your deck to the graveyard. It's a free level 7 body. That's it. The other effects might as well not exist because the protection is too specific for no reason, and the floating has a total of 1 Harpie card it synergizes with. Still, you run it because it easily summons itself and lets your effects that rely on high level Harpies apply without having to drag out their extended family onto the field. Enough bird watching for now, time for the bird grading. Their consistency is honestly fine. It's not prime era zodiacs or anything, but most of the time you'll have at least a simple play available in your first hand. This is compounded by their various summon from deck options, as well as new generic support such as Wing Requital or Summon Storm. That's not to say they can't brick out the ass, but your hands are generally salvageable. Their power is around the same grade. The stats are nothing special, but you have enough field presence for a decent amount of damage every now and then. It's average output for a deck not explicitly focused on beatdown. In terms of recovery, they mostly rely on floating effects of the back row, the end phase searching from Oracle and Harpist, as well as the effect of Harpie's Feather Rest. Most of these serve more as play extenders rather than recovery, but you definitely have comeback options in case things go south. It's a 2 heavily bordering on a 3. Protection exists primarily in the form of Conductor and Phantasmal Dragon, as well as Simorg of Sovereignty for accounting more generic support. These cards work well enough for what they are, but the amount of resources you need to expend to make them usually means they're left as a backup option. Strong, but too few and far between, so again, it's a 2 bordering on a 3. Now, Harpie's versatility is actually pretty decent. While they do get locked into wind summons every now and then, they have access to a wide pool of rank 4s and 7s, very strong back row in the form of Duster and Storm, as well as several ways to access Barrier Statue of the Storm Winds, which is a great disabling tool. And it also helps that some of their floating effects make Forbidden Droplet a solid choice for negation, and they make for some fun variants such as Wind Witch, Dragoonity, or Tri-Brigade. They're not gonna carry you through a YCS or anything, but with the options they have, Harpies pull through against stronger decks surprisingly often. This is a very comfortable tree. Here's a decklist featuring the vanilla Harpie Lady, and here's a slight modification for the remakes, replacing Unexpected Dive with Summon Storm. Save for Swallow's Nest, nothing I haven't mentioned yet should be in here, and the ratios are pretty flexible, so feel free to adjust it to your liking. It's kind of annoying that your best extra deck monsters are not even members of the archetype, but what do you do? Harpies are definitely a relic of the past, but honestly, with the way they've been treated, you can hardly tell these days. This archetype has been modernized so smoothly that the cracks in its ancient design are very rarely detrimental to its playstyle. Even while focusing around the most archaic parts of the deck, the support has been lenient enough to make room for a lot of fun plays, which are definitely helped out by the fact that the archetype has had an unreasonably strong playmaker since literal day one. In case there's more support coming in the near future, I fully expect it to expand the deck's toolbox even more, and hopefully add a boss monster or two as my personal preference. It's not a particularly strong deck, but its versatility and iconic artwork were definitely the key factors in amplifying its staying power in the fanbase. But probably mostly the artwork.
Whoa, mama!
Okay, everybody, due to unpopular demand, I thought that I'd take you all through old Ojama country. Now, the Ojama country that you are more familiar with is not the first Ojama country because we had to abandon this one due to all of the Harpies. Bird! Yeah, you see, like that one. So I thought I'd take you through some of the monuments that we've managed to build here, and just duck if you happen to see anything flying towards you. So over here we have the Ojama King War Memorial. The Ojama King stubbed his toe on this rock, and so we added a bunch of more rocks onto it so that if he ever got near that rock again, he'd see it because there'd be a whole bunch of other rocks. Well, then he stubbed his toe again on the other rocks, so we added some more, and now you have what you see before you today, which is a lot of stones. Okay, moving on. Bird! It's a bad one today. You know, sometimes it happens. Alright. Over here, we have the Ojama Yellow Knighthood Ceremony Memorial. Ojama Yellow kneeled on these as he was being knighted into the Ojama Knight. It was a big day for everybody. I was there. No one else was there. Moving on, we have the Ojama Green Sculptuary. It's pretty much the sum total of all the work he's ever done, all the sculpture, all the art. He never did a lot, but what he did was very impactful. Very big in Ojama culture. I mean, look at it. You can just sort of tell. I don't even have to explain these to you. It leaps out at you. Bird! Okay. Oh, that's just a pile of rocks. Yeah, there's nothing special about that. I just sort of put those there. And that's the end of the tour. I hope you've enjoyed. I hope that you learned a little something. Maybe came away a little wiser. And, Robot Dragon!